said to Todd the other day, and I think they probably tweeted it too, still one of my favorite open source conferences ever. I've been to a lot of them. Jim Jagaski and I have been to a lot of them. This is one of my favorites, and I'm really excited that you're all back. This was going to work. It's going to connect. Technical nerds. Welcome back in person. First CLS in person since we all went. So I'm really excited that all of you are here, and grateful to Todd, and just can't wait to get started on both our keynotes and our unconference this afternoon. By the way, how many have done an unconference before? A few? Okay, so for the rest of you, we'll kind of give you an explanation of what this looks like. It looks a little chaotic, but we've done this now. Gosh, I don't know how long John has been doing this. So we kind of have it down, and Van Ripper will be here a little bit later and kind of help us organize what the unconference thing looks like. You should have Wi-Fi access. If you don't, that's all the information you need. And let's see. So let's address this. One of these things does not look like the other. And despite our stunning lack of fashion sense from both of us, Jono is a dear, dear friend of mine. I've known him for more than 10 years. He is the person I go to for anything related to community. He's also the person I go to for career advice, but he's awesome. And he is doing the right community thing, which is being with his son, because his wife Erica is in Tel Aviv. So Jono is going to be doing Halloween. By the way, happy Halloween, everybody. And we joked about which one of us was going to dress up as Jono. I tried my best, but not quite the same. I drew the line at growing a soul patch. I said I wasn't going to do that, but but there's nothing wrong with the soul patch. I just couldn't grow one in time. By the time Jono got to me and said, "Hey, would you please do this?" So, but yeah, again, thankful to Jono for everything he's done for community and for helping us folks who are community practitioners. A little bit of that, the schedule today. So Todd sort of mentioned it earlier. We're doing our kickoff, and then at 11, when we finish these keynotes, we're going to do what we call the unconference pitches and talk selection. So you'll see we'll have these set out. There's some Sharpie, some other, and some index cards. So basically, we're going to have you come up, write which talk that you want to give is, and it can be anything related to community. Maybe even not community. And then after we have those written down, we'll have you kind of come up here, give a quick brief synopsis of what you want to give your talk on, and then we'll collect all of those, and when Van gets here, Van took a red eye. My person that's going to manage this for us took a red eye, so he's be here a little bit later, but he'll help you. That the board, the jobs board that you saw up there is going to do double duty. We'll kind of have everything broken out into the different session rooms, and we have all of these session rooms on the 300 block. And so we'll kind of break up into after the break at 11:45. We'll come back, and then the unconference portion of the presentation will start, and then you'll get to kind of go to whichever one of those kind of suits your fancy. So questions about the and you can see that we're breaking for lunch. Looks like at 1 o'clock, and then we'll kind of keep going in these unconference blocks. So questions about that? Yes. Oh, yes, thank you so much. We have note-taking docs, and I will put this up later for all of us to use. Thank you so much, appreciate that. Okay, moving on. Should be some familiar faces in here. I think I'm in here somewhere. I think I'm actually blocked by the black banner, but this was taken in Portland, where I now live. And it's just, I wanted to put it up here because it reminds me of the great things that we get with CLS, right? The being in person, just the energy and the amount of people that come to make this happen. So really, really excited again for all of you, and thankful that you all took your time to come. Obviously, Todd mentioned 10 years of ATO. I've been to all 10. I was really, really excited to come to this one. So the quick story, I'm at NVIDIA now, and we're actually on a little bit of a travel lockdown, and I told my boss, I'll actually pay to come here. So I did that, which is awesome, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It's, again, one of my favorite open source conferences ever. When Jono asked me to take this on, and it was a little bit last minute, but it kind of ended up working out, I was a little bit frightened, and then I realized I don't have to be frightened. I have a community, and these fine folks are going to be both giving you keynotes, and Van will be helping us with the unconference. So it's great that you can put on an event like this and not have to worry about, hey, how do you get everything done, right? Jason printed signs for me. We're actually using a community to put on this conference. So I'm really, really excited for you to hear from all of these folks. And please, if you see them, definitely thank them for everything they're doing to make this happen today. So the kind of one thing I wanted to leave us with before we get to our first keynote is, I think what I have found in the last 2 years of going through COVID is that community is a perishable skill, right? It's the kind of thing that if you don't practice it, and we've all gotten really good at doing it over Zoom. The reality though is that you kind of do have to be in person, right? Even the best communities in the world, Linux kernel, whatever, still meet once or twice a year to make sure that they have that connection, to make sure that they're all on the same page and in sync. So I'm really, really excited that, again, we're able to do this in person, that we're able to actually come together and work on these perishable skills. Because I said this to somebody yesterday, I've been at NVIDIA now 8 months. I've run open source program offices for a lot of different companies. But in my first 3 months at NVIDIA, I kind of wanted to not be there after a while. And it was my own fault, because I didn't take the advice that I had given and I'd been given as a community person, which was, don't come in and try to be a +1, right? Be a 0, and that's okay, and kind of learn and understand and absorb what's going on in the community. And so it just really made me think about the fact that, when you don't practice that stuff, right, when you don't actually engage as a community, it's a perishable skill. So I'm glad you're all here, glad we're all going to be able to work on this today. So I talked a little bit about what this is going to look like, but you'll see, this is actually, I think, a picture from maybe Austin or maybe Portland, where this is kind of what it'll look like. We'll show what the, kind of break down the different sessions. The cards will go up there and get taped up there. And so you'll kind of be able to see at a glance, oh, I want to go to this talk, I want to go to that talk. So let's kind of talk about four keynotes for you folks today. Excuse me. Paloma is going to start us off and talk about codes of conduct and what happens when they're broken. Followed by Lisa Marie, who's going to talk about how to architect inclusive developer communities. And then Amber's going to give us, I'll let her tell you what the acronym is. I want to spoil the surprise. And then finally, Jason Hibbets here from Red Hat is going to talk about how to prevent and survive burnout. And 5:05, we're going to come back, do a quick wrap up, so thank you for the notes. And what will happen is anybody who wants to talk about kind of their learnings of the day, any particular session they thought was important, and kind of share all of that with us, that'll be fantastic. It'll be a good way for us to wrap up the event. Hashtags, if you want to use them for social media, CLS 2022 and ATO 2022. So with that, I believe we're at the end, and I'll invite Paloma up to come do her keynote.
Thank you all for being here this morning. It is quite good to see everyone sharing this community feeling thoughts. And when I was invited to give a talk here, is the first time I'm attending, the first question was like, what can I bring that can actually benefit the communities? And it happened to be in the exact moment that I'm going through something that I hope can benefit you all, that is, what the heck happened when actually the code of conduct is actually broken? So, code of conducts are no longer an option for any event, and I think any kind of open source community, right? We see them everywhere. We see people talking all the time. They need to be enforced. You need to have the code of conduct in place. But please raise your hand, the ones who actually read every single code of conduct for every event you make. Anyone? They kind of became like airplane safety cards. We know it's there, we assume they're all the same, but we do not actually get in touch or understand what they mean, right? And I want to give a shout out, because I think it took me a long time to find out who was the one kicking starting and having efforts to create this thing we talk all the time. And I came across Coraline Ada, and she was the one creating the contributor covenant, so I think it's also important to acknowledge the ones who did this long work that take us to have this in place. Code of conducts, like the safety cards, they are created to foster basically the safe environment for everyone, especially for the ones who feel uncomfortable in most of the places they do not feel represented. But what actually that is? So one thing that is very important is to have those clear rules or a clear, how do I say that? Like a disagreement, like a, how do we like to conduct and feel safe in this place? And the second part is what happens when those rules are broken or they're not respected, right? And, but most important is like we're humans and most of those rules, we're not talking about a very clear thing that can happen, right? We can think about tragedies and that's quite clear. But we're humans with misunderstandings that they're not that clear most of the times. They live in between fine lines. And as a community organizer, when we want to enforce that, that put us in a very delicate position without any kind of tools to actually deal with. And because I didn't present myself at the beginning, that was on purpose, I love to switch orders. But this is me, I'm Paloma Oliveira, and as you heard in the last phrases, I am a community organizer. I am a developer advocate at Sauce Labs, and although I have switched careers not a long time ago, I've been advocating for FOSS, both philosophy and usage, for a long time, since like 2009. I am a co-organizer of Ladies Berlin, and I'm also a mentor at Frauenloop, which is a school in Germany where I live now that is for women and refugees. So I do a lot of advocacy work, especially for women and diversity in technology. And I do that everywhere, right? Being a co-organizer of Ladies, creating events, and also in my company as well. Enjoying the time to say that we have a fellowship program designed with that in thought. And this is one of the things I learned in this community. We need to be advocates anywhere we are and using our positions and our privilege to bring that. And this is where this fellowship started and it's in place right now. So this is me. And so I think about community all the time. The strategies, how can we feel safe? How can we feel happier? How these communities can feel better? This is what I do now for a living, but also in my free time all the time. And it's because of, and I know that because it is because of the support of those communities, especially ladies, that I could switch my career. So I know how important it is to actually have a place where I feel safe and belonging, which we heard yesterday a lot, right? Like this idea of belonging. And if you go back to the Code Covenant, this is one thing that we hear, that it's stated. As a leader, which I am now in the community, you are responsible for the safe, fair, and transparent enforcement of your community's code of conduct. And then it's like, oh, what does it mean? Like as a, when we're not on the stage or feeling brave enough to say that you're advocating for it and you're there like as a human in front, you say like, what does enforcement means? Besides of the written words of the website, which kind of tools do I have to enforce? That means that I have to use force to do it? Like, what does it mean? So what we do most of the time is that we actually hope the humans around us are just great humans and they will never break it, right? But that actually happened a few weeks ago. And we were all like, what do we do now? And this is what I want to share with you, a little bit of this experience so you can have some tools to deal with, because it's going to happen. So the first one is, the responsibility is not yours alone, but the community. And this is super important. That avoids you to being a target, and that happened without giving details, but the organizer was in a person event, so she was the one there having to deal with the situation, and she wanted a fast resolution because there was someone feeling harmed, right? But that's not the best approach, because that means that this organizer became a personal target of someone that easily scaled up and was threatening her with lawsuits, and actually was really scaled up. So don't do that. Try to rely on the community. Don't take the burden on you, because that can be super heavy, and rely on the community you support. Lesson number 2. have a clear process, and that includes having a committee. So in that case, someone who feels harm can go to a committee of people that would try to be as unbiased as possible and try to have a reflected understanding of what happened to protect you, but that will not make anyone a target. And if you have no idea what a process is, I found this article from Emma Irvin, and she's describing how they did at the Mozilla community. I found it a great article because it is kind of addresses how do you actually have a process. I particularly do not like cancellation of punishment culture. I think that is a very simplistic way to deal with very normative problems at scale. But when you think about this community, you really care. And I mean, I'm talking about dressing the Pie Ladies t-shirt, not my companies, because I think companies have some other legal issues. But as other communities that you take care and you're looking to the humans, those problems are, you can understand how much that can come from a very large systemic and complex issues. But worse than having a punishment culture that I dislike is your community not trusting that they can really feel safe on it. So if you don't know how to start with that, okay, if I don't punish because I have no other references, what do I do? Start at least with that and have the clear process, because the most important of all is your community feeling safe. And the third, it's building a code with the community. So instead I know it's super easy, you copy paste, you can have the code covenant and so many others, you can literally just add it to your community. But try to make some effort to build that with the community you have. Use the language people use, so that can actually be part of everyone's responsibility and not just some words on a website. That makes the whole difference, because people feel like, oh, there was such a great talk yesterday, I think it was from Namphy, and she was talking about the importance of having the language and building this playlist so people could feel belonging, and that's what it's about. This code is for the benefit of all, so that should be built and be part of everyone's responsibility. And fourth, seek different perspectives and people with more experience. Seek for help. You don't need to have all the answers, right? Even as an organizers, we're there, and in the case of Pie Ladies and most of communities, we do most of the jobs, like a job, in a volunteer base and in extra hours. So it is a volunteer place. You don't need to have all the answers, but you can look for support and other people. And we did have that from this amazing woman called Oliveira. She's a graduate. She's graduating in Bates University in gender and sexuality studies, and she brought another perspective that to me was mind-blowing. That she would talk about restorative justice instead of punishment justice. And when you change this perspective, the whole idea behind it is that you scale down and talk to humans and try to address the ones who was harmed, but to restore what is being done. So that's the idea of restorative. And the fifth and last one is, I know this idea of restorative justice can quickly become a buzzword as well, but try to understand the ideas behind this, to try to find solutions behind that just idea. If you don't do that, you will be canceled, you're out. Because that can be very, very, very sad. And I know this can be very demanding and complex, but we are, at the end, part of healing of a systemic, very problematic humanity we live in. So I am not expert on it, but I did ask Elliot. This is the resume of the 5 most important lessons learned during this experience. And I did ask Elliot, can I please quote the things that I learned, because I think this is the most beneficial thing I can bring to this summit. And she said yes, because she's great. And so this is a resume of how I understand how to start thinking about it differently about the code of conduct, breaks, and dealing with those issues. So the whole idea behind is that it's concerning healing the victim's wound. So the center is always the victim, always. And repairing the harm. So another key word that to me was super important learning and trying to start reading about it is accountability. So you don't punish, but you hold accountability. You have the one who did the harm to understand what it is to be in the victim's shoes. And that's restoration. And this is an example, simple example to understand. So when you have the traditional, you have what has been broken, and then you change the question to ask, what harm has been done? You go out of the, who broke it and point to the finger, you go to the idea of what are the needs of those involved? What is needed here? And you go out of this, which punishment it deserved, to go to how can this be repaired? And the idea is the victim is always in the center, but it's not, again, like I go back to the slide, you need the three stakeholders. You need the victim, you need the offender, but you also need the community around them, because at the end it will affect everyone. And this is the last slide is the idea of a practical example what happened, and this has been used a lot of in schools. So if you go from an idea of punishment, you go from a person that needs to be isolated and you will end up in the prison or in juvenile. While if you go to the other approach, you will listen, you will understand what's going on, you will take time to understand, you involve the community, and you ended up putting someone in the society that will be there to solve and repair what it's done. And that's what I wanted to share. I do have, that's a little bit nerdy for the ones who really like books, but those are my personal theoretical references. They will think a little bit further about what is this idea of surveillance and punishment goes about, if you want to read more. And well, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful for you. Reach out to me. This is the slide QR if you want to download it, but reach out to me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa, as Guy said, she, her, and I am the head of development relations at Cockroach. It's going to be really hard for me to stay behind this thing. I'm part of the team, you know. Hi, everyone. But I will. I know, I see that. Head of development relations at Cockroach Labs, which is the Cockroach TV database, but also CNCF ambassador and cloud data containers organizer in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a really large user group. It's one of the largest CNCF user groups. I think we're around 7,000 people. I just hit this. So if this slide looks like the dog's breakfast, there's a reason for that. All of us in community wear a lot of hats. You just heard Paloma walk through the 25 roles that she personally is juggling. We all have a lot of different hats that we wear, and I want to bring this up because there's different types of communities, and if we're all here as community managers, community organizers, community architects, whatever role we play, there's still different types of communities and segments within that. And so maybe you're organizing a community that's around an open source project like Docker or OpenStack or Kubernetes. Maybe you're organizing a community in a region where you're showcasing end user technology, like what we try to do in SF Bay Cloud Native Containers. Maybe a corporation has asked you to organize a community around a singular technology, like Puppet or OpenShift or Cockroach TV. These all have different approaches, and probably most people here are doing all three or some version of more than one of those. But they have different approaches and they have different ways to measure them, and they're going to have different goals. And so there's no one size fits all. So in the short time we have, I just want to walk through some things to think about that we can kind of drill down on more later today. Does that work? Oh, I don't need this. I'm standing here. I can just push your slides forward. Okay, so the first question, if you have developer advocate or community manager in your title on your LinkedIn profile, you probably get 5, 6 job offers a day, or recruiters reaching out to you. This is a huge thing right now. Everybody in a company, for some reason, thinks they need this role. And so what I ask is, why do we want a community? Like, you really have to be super clear here, because if you don't know why, you're never going to succeed. So what are you trying to accomplish with this community that you're building? And then who makes up the community? I mean, this is, show of hands of who's been asked to win the hearts and minds of every developer for your community. I mean, right? Like, that doesn't exist. Hearts and minds of every developer. I've been asked to do that. That's just not a thing, right, as you know. And so we really have to drill down on that, and then figure out which segment of your community that you wanna focus on first. So some examples of what that might look like. Some communities are built because people come together for open source products, content sharing companies. Are you trying to build a community where you need contributors upstream to a project? Are you trying to build a community where you're going to be ultimately working for a foundation like the Linux Foundation, not working for, but working as an ambassador for? Are you trying to build a better product? Is your user experience going to be the reason somebody may or may not adopt your technology? Obviously, you want to reduce churn, so maybe you're trying to build a community to get feedback. Are you trying to build a community of advocates out there to advocate for your product? So there's definitely examples of what you need to think about solidly before you embark on this journey. And these are kind of the 6 keys to the community that I've narrowed this down to. And so my next 6 slides will kind of drill into this a little bit, and we can drill into this a lot more. But setting your clear goals up front, understanding who your community is, learning how and what can be measured. The metrics are really, really tricky, but there's ways to do it. There's a lot more tools that exist now than that used to. And then there might be some places that you can look to build community that you haven't really thought about, and I hope we talk about this more throughout the day, but I'm going to bring up one example. Obviously, it's all about empathy, it's all about listening, it's definitely about education, right? And it's about giving developers or community members a sense of belonging, a sense of place, a feeling of being valued. You want to build inclusive communities and you want to retain your members, so that's super, super important. But like with anything else, content is key. If you're running a meetup group and you don't have good content, you're not going to get people coming back. I mean, maybe they'll come for beer and pizza, maybe they'll come for the networking, maybe they're looking for a job, but really at the end of the day, it's about content. I've based our user group in the Bay Area about showcasing end user stories. I really love to give end users a chance and a platform to tell their story. Like Rejects Conference, all the talks that didn't get accepted at KubeCon or another place, it's a great place to showcase that. There's some really, really great content out there that doesn't always get a platform. So content is always key. So in terms of aligning with your company goals, if you've been asked to do this by a corporation, it's going to be really tricky if that corporation thinks they're going to have an immediate return on investment. How many of you have been asked, where are the leads from that meetup you ran? You're like, yeah, you're not going to get those. Not today, not ever. There's different metrics that you have to show the ROI, but you have to show the ROI or you're not going to get your programs funded. And even a lot of us that are running community meetups that aren't based on a singular technology, they are often sponsored by corporations, and those corporations still want to understand the value. So aligning with the company goals is going to be really important. Product feedback is always a great one. You are the voice of the community to the company, you're the voice of the company to the community, you're the voice of the products to both of them. So that feedback loop is super, super important. And there's other goals that are not sales and marketing goals. It's not that you're not supporting the sales or marketing team, you just have really different goals and different things that you're gonna measure. A lot of it comes down to branding. You're out there as a recognizable brand. You're putting your brand on the map in a lot of different places. And even if you're not talking about, I'm not talking about Cockroach this entire conference, but even yesterday, a couple of people walked up to me and just asked about it. It's a branding thing. You can run around with a bug on your shirt, and that's all you kind of need to do. So there's a lot of goals for the company of, why you might be involved in this, but you have to figure out how to align with what your company's goals are and make it matter to them, or your group is not going to get funded, and it's going to be one of the first targets. We've all been through that, probably multiple times. I know I have. So understanding who your community is. Again, back to that, win the hearts and minds of all developers doesn't exist. It's getting spooky in here. Happy Halloween, everyone. I had little bug antennas, but one of them popped off when I was running over here. So if anyone has any glue, I'll be more in costume later. Narrow down, focus on your community. Are your developers early adopters? Like if you have an early open source project and you need contributors, Are they, front-end web developers, or are they, is someone leaning against the light switch? Is that what's happening? Full stack developers, right? I mean, you figure out what your community is going to be based on and target that. If it's based around the language, that's going to be a very different place that your community is going to live and exist. So figure that out. And if your target really is developers, then that's fine. But if it's not, and it's really operators or architects, don't forget about them too, right? I mean, we were involved in the early days of OpenStack and Kubernetes as well. And we heard the operators screaming, what about us? And then how long did it take to get the CKA, the Certified Kubernetes Admin course in there? There's a lot of different roles that you have to think about. So figure out how you want to target. And then what metrics are going to be meaningful to you? If you have an open source community that you're architecting, maybe you want your community to be 25% more diversified next year. Maybe you want more upstream contributors. Maybe you need doc writers. Not maybe, you do need doc writers. You need doc writers. So figure out what you need and write that down. And then where does your community reside? You can track this. Is it in forums, chat rooms, Stack Overflow? Yes. Discord, Slack, Discourse. There's so many places. Meetups, and obviously user group meetings are very great ways. And then the tools are getting better. There's Orbit, there's obviously built-in analytics to Discourse like MAU, DAU. There's third-party mentions. You can track clicks on websites, click-throughs on emails. There's a lot of stuff you can track. You can funnel it all through Grafana, graphs. There's ways to track and to show growth in your community that would probably make sense to the folks that don't understand community, but they understand graphs and charts. So that's a good thing to think about, and those are some metrics. These are example, the Data on Kubernetes community is another community that I've been very active in, and they're amazing. They've built this incredible community, mostly online, because during the pandemic, we've now only done about 4 or 5 in-person meetups. It's all over the world, global community. And these are some of the things that they felt like that were important to track. They do get sponsors from different enterprises, and these are some of the metrics they report back. And it's been huge growth. This is just in 1 year that they've done 148 live streams. Bart and Slavon are out of control. And if you don't know Bart Farrell, you should know Bart Farrell. He's just a gem, a wonderful human being. Lives in Spain and it's grown this community into a beautiful thing. Where are some unlikely places to maybe find some of your future developers and community users? One of my favorites that people don't take enough advantage of is hackathons. Hackathons are amazing. First of all, there's so much energy. You don't even have to sleep, right? They're usually 24 hours, 36 hours. You're surrounded by more than half my, very young. I'm not, and we're not too bad. I focus on college student hackathons because they're generally very well run. Well, we know the ones that are, and we try to get involved in those. Students do very fun things like build origami roaches for you and leave them on your desk. But it's a really great place to get your technology, whether it's an open source project or whether it's a technology from your company. You can get that in front of students. And there's so much goodness. These pictures were all taken from last spring when hackathons just started coming back in person. But I just did 2 last month. Cal Hacks in Berkeley and the University of California hackathon, but it was actually in San Francisco this year, at the Marriott Marquis, because they had 2,000 people there. And we were at Hack the North, which was 1,500 people. I mean, massive amounts of students there in the room. And there's so many things that you get and that they get. First of all, obviously it's awareness. They probably haven't heard of a lot of the technology that is there, but they hear about you through hackathons. And these students are the best and the brightest. They're going to graduate in 1 to 2 years and go out into corporations, and if they love your technology, they're going to want to use it in wherever they go. So it's not as long an ROI as you think. And when you try to justify this, to get the funding for it, which you will have to do, and you'll get a lot of funny looks like, why would you go to the university and spend all this money and stay up for 48 hours and build solo cup pyramids? You will do that because there's awareness, there's awesome recruiting opportunities. If you run internships through your corporations, this is a great place to find interns. But one of my favorite things is the real-time feedback. We were releasing a serverless version of our product a year ago, and some of the brightest students at Hack North up in Waterloo, near Toronto, Canada, uncovered a bug for us. Like we were about to, put this thing out there, and it was a pretty crucial bug. And when you only have 24 hours to use technology, you don't have time to take a whole course that's going to take a week. I mean, you need to have really good docs, really good tutorials, and a really easy to use product that just works. But if it doesn't work, they will let you know. And you get a lot of that real-time feedback, and you can bring that back to your product teams. So it's a great place to build community, obviously. These are some of the reasons that I like that. If you want to do hackathons, I would be happy to sit down with you today and we can map out like how you can pitch this to your company. And there's metrics that we figured out which are important to track, because also at the end of your hackathon, you're going to have about 50 apps on DevPost that are using your technology. And they're going to be out there on DevPost with a little video talking about how they used it forever. So there's a lot of good things, and then we usually, pick our favorite couple of apps and feature those students on a live stream and let them talk about how they built it and what they built. So there's a lot of goodness that comes out of it, and there's a lot of, long-term gifts that keep giving. So back to if you're running meetups and hackathons, swag is one of those things that, maybe if you're at a major conference like a Linux Foundation conference and there's thousands of booths, people kind of, get a little cranky about swag because it's all just going to end up landfill. So think very consciously about your swag. One of the things that we love to do, because when it comes to hackathons and meetups, people really do love swag. I mean, especially if it's good swag and it's something that is useful or something that people will actually use, and it won't end up landfill. But our favorite way to give swag is charity. And you'll see us doing this at the Cockroach booth. If you want to pop by, we will donate $3 in your name to a charity that you pick. We've got 4 of them lined up for this show. We have done this for every conference we've been at for over 3 years. And it has been, I mean, we had like a big sign that said, come and scan your badge and we'll donate $3 to Black Girls Code at AWS reInvent 2 years ago. And people were like running across the aisle to come and donate and have their badge scanned. It's a really effective way to give back and to say thank you. I just saw Todd walk in, so I had to say that. I had to get that in. It's a great way to give back. And but if you do give away something like a shirt, make sure you're inclusive and that you have sizes for everybody. And how people like to wear their shirt. So you want to give somebody something they're actually going to wear. And also foundations will support you in this. This is one of those Kubernetes fidget spinners. They knew I ran a really large user group in the SF Bay Area, and I think it was after the KubeCon Austin. And they said, hey, we've got a bunch of these, we'll send them to you you can give them out during your user group. These 5 boxes showed up at my front doorstep, and these things are heavy. It was massive amounts of these Kubernetes fidget spinners. I'm still giving them out. This thing was $8 on the Linux Foundation or the CNCF store, and I'm giving them out at meetups. So don't be afraid to ask your kind foundation that you're supporting or that you're showcasing their technology for some help. And also conference discounts is a great thing to give out to your community. A lot of conferences, especially online tickets, will give this to you for free or at a very discounted rate for you to share with your community. So there's a lot of tools. But again, charity is my favorite, and one of my favorite charities, I mentioned it yesterday, is a charity called The Last Mile. It's something that the DOK, Data and Kubernetes community, donates a lot to, and we've started donating a lot to. And it's an organization that helps teach technology to incarcerated folks so that when they get to leave, they can go immediately into a tech job, and it's an incredible organization. So check out The Last Mile if you don't know about that one already. So my last slide, what is community, and really more importantly, what it is not. So you're not gap fillers. I mean, this is like one of the hardest things to try to explain to corporations. It's a lot of things, it's a lot of goodness that you can do, but don't fall into the same trap of having the same metrics as like a sales and marketing team, because those aren't going to be your metrics. You're going to have completely different goals, but you will support sales and marketing. You just have a different agenda. So you're not part of the quota carrying pipeline generally, but you are, as I mentioned when I first started, you are the voice of your company to the community, but more importantly, the voice of your community to your company, and your technology is the third part of that triangle. So you're the fusion between all of that stuff, and that feedback is super, super valuable, and it doesn't come from kind of anywhere else. You play a different role. So think about that, and whether you're an open source project that you're organizing or you're not working for a company, but you still might have a way to give feedback back to that company because you're hearing a lot of things from the community. I would encourage to make those connections because you never know where that's going to lead. But anyway, those are kind of my high level things, and I hope we drill down on these things more today. And I hope we actually talk about accessibility also, because we didn't really get into that yesterday. But that is a really important and lesser talked about part of DE&I. And so I hope that one of the unconferences we get to drill down into that a little bit.
You can propose that.
Oh, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert in that, but I would love to foster, help facilitate discussion. So I would be happy to. That's me. You can reach out all day.
So thanks everybody for attending today. So this talk, actually the talk title came about 10 years ago when I got started actually 12 years ago now I guess, when I got started in Ubuntu and the Fedora communities. And what N2 means is non-technical end user. Now what I'm going to say over and over and over again in this talk, you're going to get tired of me saying that, is do not label people as non-technical end users. That's not for you to label people as that. That's somebody who self-identifies as a non-technical end user. So I just want to make that clear. I am not labeling anybody as a non-technical end user, and neither should you. Because I'm going to point out, just because you don't write code, or just because they don't write code, they're very technical. Because I know some very smart people who write, kernel code that can't figure out Google Docs. So technical, a technical end user comes in many, many forms. So a little bit about me and why this topic is so important. So I started out as a volunteer in Ubuntu and the Fedora communities. And I got to write a couple Ubuntu books. If you've heard of the official Ubuntu books, I helped co-author editions 6 and 7. But, I've been labeled as non-technical because I don't write code. And then I went on to Linaro, which is Linux on ARM. I was their first community manager. From there, I went to Open Compute, and I helped architect and build that community out. But I didn't know anything about data center hardware or the software that runs on a data center, but I could rack and stack any of the Open Compute hardware by the time I left there. From there, I went to CoreLight. CoreLight is the corporate sponsor for the Zeek project. It used to be called Bro back in the day. It's been around about 26 years now. It's a network security monitoring tool, framework actually, and language. And then from there now I'm at Arrikto. And Arrikto is machine learning operations. And we do a lot in the Kubeflow community. And so, over the years, matter of fact, I got asked this probably 4 times yesterday. So are you technical? Do you write code? I didn't even answer. I think I answered one person because the way they asked it was very sincere and they didn't mean anything insulting by it. Other people ask it like as a, do I want to talk to you question? And that's why I have the snarky picture that I sent, because that's the look I get when people ask me that. And so when you think about that, when you think about all the people, because I entered the world of open source, my first experience with open source was back in the early 90s when I laid on a drop zone at Fort Bragg and established an uplink to a C-130 because we were testing to see if we were using Slackware, testing to see if we could get intel passed to those troops who were about to jump out of an airplane somewhere, because 18th Airborne Corps could be anywhere in the world in 18 hours or less. When they took off, the only intel they had was what they landed with. So they didn't get intel en route. So the forward line of battle could have changed while they were en route. And so we were testing that back in the early 90s. But I didn't personally get involved until 2009. And so, I looked around and there's a lot of people who, and many of you, let me ask this question, how many of you identify as you don't write code? Maybe you don't call yourself a non-technical end user, but you don't write code, but you're active in the community. And how many of you have said at yourself some point in time, I don't write code, so maybe I can't contribute? I did. And I had somebody tell me, no, you can contribute. And you know what? They were right. And I'm going to show you what I did at the end of this, my very first year. And because I was encouraged, I wouldn't advise anybody to do what I did my first year, because it's going to lead into Jason's talk about burnout, but very clearly. But it's very important that you in your organizations make sure that you value those soft skills you value the other technical skills besides code. Because if you don't, you may push away people who can help bring your organization or your product or your project to the next level. And if all you value is code, or you have this technical arrogance that only code matters, you're missing a huge and important sector in your community. So the myth, you have to write code to be technical. No. You have to write code to contribute to an open source project. No. And don't label. Don't label. Let somebody who self-identifies, let you encourage them to get involved and help them see where they're technical. Look, I only speak one language, and that's English. And I don't do it very well because I self-identify as a redneck from North Carolina, and I'm passionate about that. I'm proud of my roots. But you know, everybody identifies different ways, right? They identifies different things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it's self-deprecation. And sometimes people are they're way more technical than they realize, and they're your expert or your guru on that. And I'm going to talk about that word because I showed somebody that the slide deck memory, but I don't use the word guru. Why? Because they're like, it's a religious thing. I'm like, I don't mean that. I mean somebody with knowledge or expert. And I looked at them and I said, then give me another word that rhymes with into that means expert. They couldn't do it. So hence the title. But I get it. I'm not trying to, you know, force religion on anybody or anything like that. I'm talking about every person who identifies as a non-technical end user is somebody's expert on something. You know, chances are everybody knows more than you at some point, and everybody knows less than you. And so we all have the opportunity to learn from one another. And if you don't, again, in open source, it's so prevalent. Even today, you know, or you know, yesterday when I got asked, "Are you technical?" You know, even today, there's always going to be somebody smarter. There's always going to be, you know, who knows more. And there's always somebody going to be that knows less. So you have the opportunity, even if you self-identify as a non-technical end user, you are somebody else's expert on some topic that's related to this ecosystem. So always keep that in mind and don't sell yourself short, or don't let people in your project or your organization sell themselves short. Become their advocate and help them, you know, see where they can really stand out and shine. So, you know, again, I'm going to probably say this way more than you probably want to hear, but it, like some people think, you know, that non-technical, you know, means you don't write code. What it actually means is that you have soft skills. You have these great personality traits. You know how to interact with others. And we're going to go through those very quickly here in a second because I think I've only got like 8 minutes on it. So here's some hard skills, like it includes but not limited to writing code. Look at your productivity software. How many people, you know, have heard of Jira or Salesforce and setting that up, or Trello or Slack, or becoming the admins on any of that stuff? Those are technical skills. And then there's industry-specific skills, such as your product managers, your program managers, your design, your marketing, like all of these. Every industry has experts that are technical on those particular industries. Like, I don't know anything about the automotive industry, other than I like my car and I like to drive it, right? So I don't know how all that, you know, all that stuff works. But somebody in that industry is an expert on that. And I would refer to them on how to do certain things in that industry or understand that industry. So don't discount folks who don't write code. I'm going to just hammer that in like nobody's business today, because I think the reason that it's so important too is because we have this new wave of people who are new to this. And those of us that have been around for a long time, I'm not going to say my age, but a long time, you know, we're seeing it start to crop its head up again, that people who are new and coming in think technical means writing code. And so it's our jobs, I think, as those who have done this for a long time, to remind folks that it, you know, technical does mean, but, you know, isn't exclusive to writing code. There's a lot more technical skills. But let's talk about the importance of the non-technical or the soft skills that people have. And we're just going to go through them really quickly. These slides will be available later. Communication. How do you effectively communicate with others? How many of you met people that can't even say hello without causing an argument? Exactly. So you need those communication skills for it. So, cooperation. Some people are like, nope, I'm not going to work with anybody. You got to do it my way. You know, I'm the expert on this. But you got to be able to work as a team. No project, you know, unless it's a project of one, can survive without cooperation. Adaptability. How do you handle change? In open source especially, there's change every day. There's change every 30 minutes in some projects. Some people can't even make up their mind between, what your goals are from 1 minute to the next. So you've got to just roll with it and be able to be adaptive. Organization. If you're not organized and you don't have like a clear plan, think about your roadmaps, think about your releases, think about all the things that you do on a project. You've got to be organized. And some people, I swear they look at my desk and think I'm not, but like when I'm working, I'm organized at home, maybe not so much. But you always have to have that organization. You've got to know where you're going, where you come from, and then how you're going to get there. And without organization, you won't be able to do that. Collaboration. If you can't work well with others, you might not be able to hang out in a community very long, because you'll suddenly realize that the community will police itself, and they'll either help you correct your behavior or they'll help you to the door, as they should against the code of conduct. Even though we talked about being punishable, sometimes you have to ask people to leave. But collaboration is very important. Creativity. One of the things I heard when I got started and I would ask questions, people would be like, Amber, why do you think we should do it that way? It's never been done that way. I'm not a fan of never been done that way, and I'm not a fan of not invented here. If somebody else has a better idea or a better way to do things, and just because it's never been done that way, doesn't mean it's not good. So somebody who has a creative mind and sees things in a different way, listen to them. Maybe you're so tunnel visioned that you've lost sight of the bigger picture, or your project has lost sight of the bigger picture because they've always done it that way. But let some of those creative ideas come in and listen to them. Creativity is an amazing skill, and also helps pave paths that oftentimes we don't see because we're too close to it. So creativity is another great soft skill. Time management. What if you say we're going to release on this date, and then you slip by 3 weeks because nobody watched the clock and nobody time managed, like whatever happened to be. Or if there wasn't good time management around the organization of this event, and we didn't get everything done or whatever. So like time management is an excellent skill. Prioritization. How do you know what to do now versus tomorrow versus next week? So those skills. There's great people who write code, but they're all over the place. They don't have their ducks in a row. They have squirrels at a rave, and like they don't know what's going on. So time management and prioritization go hand in hand. Enthusiasm. I one time gave a talk on my birthday at Open Compute. My boss says, I'm double booked. Here's my slides. Go give this talk. I didn't know the first thing about what he wanted me to go talk about, but I did it. And I showed up at this event and I said, I'm very excited to be here. I'm either going to make you so interested in this project that and this new foundation that you're going to go look at the website, or I'm going to confuse the heck out of you and you're going to go look at the website. Either way, you're going to go look at the website, and I'm really excited to have you go look at the website. So this enthusiasm, it goes a long way. So what you're passionate about, don't be afraid to show that passion. Don't be stoic when you're really excited about it. Use that passion and let it drive you and let it drive others around you. Emotional intelligence. How well you understand yourself and how well you can respond to others. That empathy that we all need, especially in communities. You need to be able to put yourself in other people's footsteps and be able to see where they're coming from. So if you don't know a lot about emotional intelligence, take a look at it and see where you're at on that emotional intelligence scale. It's very important in a community to understand what your triggers are. I know what mine are, and I try very hard not to let them be triggered, but also how you respond and how you react to others and how others respond to you. So here they all are. I'm not going to go through them again. I'm down to a few minutes here. So this is me, my very first year in open source. If people didn't value soft skills, my first year, I would have never been able to do this. And I wouldn't advise anybody to do everything I did my first year because I burnt out. I burnt out very hard. And that was the year my house also burned down. So not only did I have a mental burnout, but I had a physical burnout too. And thank goodness the open source community was around because they were both supportive in both aspects of it. And out of that burnout came a talk. I know, Jason, yours probably would be better than mine, but mine was like volunteer vertigo and high-tech hangovers, and that's what it was all about. And so I'm really excited that Jason's going to give that talk. But without people valuing those soft skills, I would have never been able to do all those things. Nor would I have co-authored to the official Ubuntu books or helped launch Ubuntu User Magazine back in the day or done any of those things. And I set out to prove when I got involved that you don't have to be a kernel developer to be successful in open source. And that means you don't have to write code to be successful in open source. So pick your passion or your poison, whichever you prefer, and go after it. Because there is a place for you in every open source project, I can promise you. So in summary, don't label people. Let them label themselves and then encourage them to get involved. Value the soft skills, understand technical is more than writing code, and become someone's mentor. My first year, these were the folks that kind of helped me get involved. And most of you may know Ricky, you might know Beth Lynn, I'm sure you know Jono, you might know Mad Dog. They all challenged me in very specific ways to get involved and stay involved. And I have. Here's all my contact information. But wait, there's one more thing with 5 seconds to go. Thank you. And if you want one of these stickers, I had the old school stickers made. The ones I blocked out the words on. I had those remade. And if you self-identify as non-technical, remember, just because you don't write code, you're still technical AF. And I have those stickers, so find me and I'll give you one.
Thank you, Amber.
Well, Amber, I'm excited that you're excited. Cool. All right. Okay, well, it's great to see so many familiar faces, and it's also great to see a lot of new faces. All right, well, let's get started. My name is Jason. We're going to talk about mental health and burnout today. The medical disclaimer, I am not a certified medical anything. This is my experience. This is what I went through. I wouldn't consider myself an expert on the topic, but this is my story, and I hope that the tips that I've learned can help you with what I've learned from my situation. This thing. Everyone in front of me was expert at moving their slide on multiple laptops at once. There we go. Where's my button? There we go. Synced up. Okay. So my story starts in, see, I already started walking away, guys, so you're gonna have to keep me on the leash. My story starts in 2017. I didn't know it at the time, but I was about to go through burnout. And I was aware of the signs of burnout as a community manager, but I was looking for the signs of burnout for the people that I worked with, my community. And I wasn't looking at the signs of burnout at myself. So that was lesson number one for me. I was completely caught off guard, and it wasn't just one single thing that made it happen. You've got your normal everyday work, family obligations. I was training for some half marathons, and normally that would be a great stress outlet for me, but I was getting a little competitive and I was trying to push myself a little too far. And then there was a surgery in our household that turned us into a one vehicle family. And so I was like the chauffeur, the bus driver, taking everyone where they needed to go. And so that just added some extra stress to probably an already stressful situation. I do remember thinking something was wrong. Like I was expecting to go to the doctor and get some test results and show me like my numbers were off or my cholesterol was high. I got like a clean bill of health. It was all mental and emotional, right? So let's see, that and that. This is not going to end well, but we'll make it. So when I look back, I was showing the signs of burnout. I didn't have much of an appetite. I was tired all the time. I was tired of being tired, right? I was sleeping in. I was just exhausted, right? I was doing really strange things. Like when I was the bus driver, I would fire up my hotspot in the back of the car and check email because I felt this intentional pressure that I put on myself to respond to my coworkers, to respond to email, to respond to chat. And I've learned a lot of things now. We're going to share some of those there. I don't have that stress in my life anymore. At the end of the day, I just wasn't motivated to get out of bed and do the things that I normally like to do. And I wasn't hanging out with my coworkers and my friends like I normally would. There we go. What? I'm going to do that one first. I'm going to try. I don't know. We're going to figure it out. Thank you, though. Am I in the same slide? No, I'm not. Here we go. Okay. So I want to mention one thing really quick. We've heard it in some of the talks today, but there's a lot of passion in open source and technology and just whatever community you're part of. We push ourselves to contribute. We've got Sorry, the really awesome Halloween costume just walked into the room. And I would like everyone to make sure that you see this beautiful, oh, it's actually my coworker, that's even better. Hey, Amy June, how are you? So there's a lot of passion in open source and communities, and we sign up for projects, we sign up for tasks. A lot of times we can push ourselves too far, and we take on more than we can handle. And so let's take a look at some of these numbers. Yes. This is taken from one of the projects I work on, the Enterprisers project. The study from Haystack in July of 2021 shows that 83% of software developers suffer from workplace burnout. So this is like right in the kind of the middle of the beginning of the pandemic, right? So the pandemic has actually increased these feelings of burnout, but there's a lot of other variables that are involved. Almost 50% of people cite that they have high workloads contribute to burnout. 31% of folks claim ineffective processes contribute to burnout. And then almost 30% say that their unclear goals or unclear targets is part of their job. And just a word of caution that passion can lead to burnout. So I'm going to give you 5 tips today. The number 1 tip is we should all know the signs of burnout. I mentioned that I was familiar with the signs of burnout, but I wasn't looking at myself. So make sure that you keep an eye on yourself. And that's why we have teams of people to help us do that as well. So if you're not familiar with burnout, it's basically a form of depression where you're just not motivated to perform the things that are expected of you at your job or in your life. And it's not the occasional slacking off, like the weather's great, I'm gonna go take a break outside and get some vitamin D. It's this buildup, it's an emotional stress where you just don't wanna do what's asked of you. And interestingly enough, healthcare providers used to refer to this as compassion fatigue. In 2019, the World Health Organization actually added a new diagnosis defining chronic workplace disorder as burnout syndrome. And so this is important because now medical professionals and insurance providers can get some of the help, the financial help and other assistance that we need for mental health. But I'm working so hard. There's so many things that can lead to burnout. Too much work, too much travel, unclear expectations, unreasonable deadlines. Maybe you're in a toxic work culture. If you are, consider getting out. And then, just everyday work-life imbalances can contribute. And I remember one thing that was extremely abnormal for me. I'm usually the social butterfly. I was actually kind of extracting myself from my team. Like I was intentionally putting myself away. They'd ask me things like, hey, do you want to go out for a happy hour? Do you want to go out and grab some lunch? Do you want to go to the cafeteria? And normally I'd be like, yes, let's go. I was too busy to hang out with my team, and I was intentionally separating myself away from them. And when I look back, I noticed, after a couple of weeks of doing that, I was like, what am I doing? I love these people. So look out for things of that nature. According to this is research with the Mayo Clinic here, and a couple of things that you can ask yourself. I won't go over all of these, but if you think you're experiencing symptoms of burnout, ask yourself, are you becoming cynical at work? Do you lack energy to do things you normally do? Are you using food, drugs, alcohol, or etc. to feel better or to not feel at all? And really important, and this was one of mine, is like, have your sleeping habits changed? Sleep is way more important than I thought it used to be when I was younger. So there's a lot of consequences of burnout. In some cases, people get really ill and sick and end up in the hospital just because they push themselves so far that they are just zapped and out of energy. I mentioned things like loss of appetite or loss of interest. I mentioned I was feeling I was separating myself from my team. I was, quote, too busy to be around them. Bless you. I wasn't sleeping well. I was staying up late. And ultimately, this led to severe anxiety because the term burnout syndrome didn't exist back in 2017, at least in this medical appliance. One thing that I want to mention again is the stresses. It's hard to self-diagnose burnout for yourself. So if you think you're experiencing that, ask a coworker, ask your manager, seek professional medical advice if you need to. And the other thing I want to mention here is that you should also listen to your body. If your body's telling you no, if your body's telling you to stop, take a moment and step back and look at the bigger picture to see what might be contributing to some of these emotions and feelings. Okay, number 2. This is probably the most important thing that I've learned, is setting limits, but also sharing those limits with the people you work with. You can set limits on the amount of time that you work on an issue before you reach out for help. You can set limits on the amount of time you spend responding to email or when you respond to email. You can block time on your calendar to avoid interruptions. And yes, you can turn off email and chat notifications to stop those constant interruptions and distractions. That's the thing, you can actually go and hit a button and turn them off. It's great, it feels awesome. I've seen a couple of things over the last couple of years that I found really interesting. I was setting up a meeting with one of my coworkers in IT, and they literally had a block on their calendar that says, absolutely no meetings. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm not gonna be meeting with that person at 4 o'clock then. All right, another great example from my experience is particularly here in the Research Triangle Park area, there's meetups all the time, right? How many of you all go to meetups or are starting to go back to meetups in person, right? I mean, I can go to probably 2 or 3 meetups a day here in the RTP area. But at a point in my life where my daughter was around 3 years old, my son was around 9, I was like, you know what? I'm going to all these great meetups, I'm learning all this cool stuff, I'm meeting all these really cool people. I don't want to miss my kids growing up, right? I don't want to come home at the end of the day and be like, well, I guess they're in high school now and I got all this cool networking stuff and all these meetups. So I set a limit, and I said I could go to 2 meetups per week. And that allowed me to prioritize which meetups were important and ultimately gave me time back with my family. And I still enforce that rule to this day, which is pretty awesome. But I don't get out of the house much, so this is rare. You get shivvy in the wild. Number 3, one of the most worst abusers of how we spend our time is unplanned work. How many of you love unplanned work? I see everyone's hand up, yes. My advice is to find ways to convert or transform unplanned work into planned work. You can ask for things like, what can I automate? But avoid getting stuck in the cycle of, well, I'll just automate it one day and then it never happens, right? So find ways to get unplanned work into your existing schedule, into your existing workflows. One of the ways that I do this is I have a personal Trello board that I use. You can use any sort of Kanban tool. This Trello is not the one, it's just one I use. You can use whatever you want. This allows me to get stuff out of my inbox and into a planned task, right? Or group things together so that I'm working on similar things at the same time. And another thing that I do, particularly like if you're doing events or any sort of thing that's in the future, is try to do as much in advance as possible. So if you're doing a meetup, maybe like don't order the food like an hour before the meetup. Maybe you have a schedule where you order that the day before, and you've got scheduled social media posts promoting your stuff. There's a lot of different things you can do to prepare in advance. Number 4, you should have some type of stress outlet. It can be a sport, a hobby, an activity, something that frees your mind from work and other life demands. If you work on computers all day, might not be a good idea to work on computers all night too. Your results may vary, everyone has different interests. I know people that do coding and gaming all the time, and that seems to be an okay balance. But you got, if I'm telling my kids to watch their screen time, I should probably be watching my screen time too. There's so many different hobbies and activities you can do. It could be painting, photography, hiking, reading, anything that puts you in a relaxed state. Surfing, yeah, that takes a 3-hour drive, man. Thanks. Let's see. Ooh, hang on, okay. Too far. Okay. This might sound a little harsh, but you can't help your team or your family if you're in a bad spot. So imagine some of you took an airplane here to get to All Things Open. Probably a lot of you are local too, but if you've ever traveled on an airplane, there's a pre-flight checklist. They tell you about the safety of the airplane, where the exits are, all that fancy stuff. They tell you that in case cabin pressure is lost, that a mask might fall in front of you and that you should put it on. You should also put your mask on first before helping others. That's the important thing. You should also know the closest exit to you could be behind you. So I always like to tell people, make time for yourself. I call this me time. And that could be meditation, reading, exercise, your favorite hobby, whatever it is. But avoid making a habit of canceling your me time, right? That's the worst thing you can do. So I recommend protecting your me time above anything else. And wrapping up here, we just went through this pandemic. Some of it's still lingering. It's a lot of change in the last few years, and I think we're not going back to the way things were. But one of the topics I've been really interested in is how we can identify remote burnout through remote. Now, a lot of us have had this remote or distributed experience. So there's a lot of a lot of things that have happened. Video fatigue is real. I did 2 virtual conferences in 2020 and I was done. Like I was like, this sucks, man. I'm like speaking to a computer. I can't see anybody. I think they're clapping. They might be chatting. I don't know what's happening, right? Am I wearing pants? I forgot. Did I even wake up today? That's fun. Anyway, so I found some things we can look for how to recognize disengagement over video and other things, right? So are people present but not engaged? They're kind of just there, right? They're not laughing at stupid jokes. They're maybe not reacting to news that people are talking about. Is someone maybe not as productive as they were, given a similar situation, right? Some of us have become teachers or caretakers or have some other duty that's beyond our job that we're having to take care of. Are people avoiding signing up for voluntary tasks like, hey, I can help with this order, or I can help with this task, this initiative? Are people bouncing out on like team lunches, team time, or team happy hours? And is someone becoming cynical, right? Or they're like, man, that project's never going to get done. I'm not even going to contribute to it, and they just have a bad attitude. So, a couple things on the positive side that have changed. One of the things that Red Hat has done, my employer, is they've implemented what they call a Red Hat Recharge Day. And I absolutely love this. When they started it, I became a huge advocate for it. We get an extra day off where everyone in the company also has the day off, which means what? You're not getting an inbox full of emails and an inbox full of notifications. And it is, I love it. It's so much, so relaxing. And it's become part of our culture now, which is really interesting. I also noticed that work meetings are getting a little more personal. People are talking about their home projects, their renovations, their buying a house or having a baby. And by the way, there's a lot more babies in meetings, which is awesome, right? And they just kind of appear, like you're just kind of on the video and like, oh, baby, and then everyone stops, is like, hey, how's the baby, right? It's really cool. And then I noticed too, another thing is that there's a lot more laughter in meetings, and there's a lot more kind of that hallway conversation types that's happening. Maybe it's the first 5 minutes of the call, or maybe you save it for the end of the call so that people can go on with other things. But since we're missing those hallway conversations and some of the things we used to do in the office and some of the things that we do when we travel, we're finally getting some of that back. So to wrap things up here, don't suffer in silence. Whatever you do to approach burnout, remember that you don't have to face it by yourself. I mentioned earlier, ask your manager, ask a colleague, ask a family member, or ask professional medical advice. So get help before you burn out, because you don't want to go over that edge. So this is the money slide. These are the top 5 tips I gave you. I will be giving this exact talk tomorrow, so if you see it on the calendar, you're more welcome to come and have some more therapy. But I would encourage you to go to another talk if you are interested, but don't mind. I wanted to call out here, there's this website, burnoutindex.org. It's supposedly anonymous. It's a 10-question survey that you can take that will let you know if you're stressed out. You should probably know it before you take it anyway. The slides will be available. All the material that I've referenced and research is here, linked, ready for you to go. And again, my name is Jason, and I went through burnout so that you don't have to. Thank you.